All right, hi you guys. Welcome to our live event today. I'm Paityn. I'm the head of patient care here at Navigator. I've been working with alternative cancer treatment facilities for the past 3 years as the head of patient care. I travel to facilities worldwide and then also connect with patients to discuss available treatment options with them. So I'm happy to connect with you and discuss what treatments might be available for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. So today's agenda, as mentioned earlier, we're going to cover why people choose alternative clinics, different therapies offered, personal experiences and stories, and also practical advice on clinics, insurance, and at-home care. As I mentioned, this will be a live event to dive into these topics, so thank you for joining. I understand that people are struggling trying to find alternative treatment options. They can't go to their regular oncologist. Maybe family is questioning why they aren't going through standard of care. You're having to search endless hours on the internet or in Facebook group to find treatments that might best align for you or that might support the whole body, because there is a lacking in standard of care and bridging alternative and conventional. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be one way or another. I do believe that there can be a happy bridge between the two, and we'll get into that later on today. So just know that we see you, you're supported here, and we're here to help any way possible. Every person I talk to, usually I try to give my cell phone number too, to let them know that you can call or text me if you're struggling and trying to find decisions. And I'll also have my team drop my link below to where you can always schedule a phone call with me through Hill Navigator's platform to where we can discuss available options, whether in clinic or perhaps even telehealth options that might be available if you're not able to travel. So just some introduction into what alternative clinics are. When we talk about alternative in the context of cancer treatment, we're talking about methods, medications, and approaches that typically you won't find under standard of care. This is not to be confused with complementary or traditional treatments, which may convene between standard of care options, such as like when you go to a facility and they say, oh, yes, alongside your chemo radiation, you can get acupuncture or massage therapy to support your body during, these typical standard of care options. Alternative cancer clinics, they offer a parallel system. So really they're focusing on supporting the whole body. They want to support your immune system. They want to detox your body, maybe of any stealth pathogens or any toxins that you might have been exposed to throughout your lifetime. They want to use things like hyperthermia as pictured here, you will see. They use local and also whole body hyperthermia. They do a wide variety of IV treatments such as chelation, which is like detoxing, or IV nutrients to support the immune system. They also use things like cancer vaccines that you can't get here in America due to the FDA regulation. So those cancer vaccines really we'll dive into later, but just a brief overview. They take your own blood, urine, or sometimes tumor biopsy, and they train it to attack the cancer cells. So this is strengthen the immune system. So the whole emphasis over it is to support the well-being through a wide variety of modalities, but also diet too. So this is crucial in regards to structuring a patient's overall well-being. These alternative methods, again, they support the natural immune process by boosting the immune system, and also facilities address the root cause. These holistic practices also include personalized treatment plans for each individual. So it's not cookie cutter. Usually it's supporting each cancer individually in regards to what might be best for that patient. A key thing to note when going to these facilities is that you have to partner with them very closely. So a thing that I notice with patients whenever I talk to them is they're told that you can come here for 3 weeks and then they assume that's it. Just like you wouldn't just work with your oncologist once, you're going to continue working with these facilities. So before we dive in, I'm just letting you know that that's key. With most patients that I have worked very closely with that have had very good success with going to facilities, they were working with their treatment facilities very intimately. So whenever you're choosing a facility, I always say logically try to find one that you can afford in the long run. Sure, initially, you're not going to pay the large lump sum of money in the beginning that you will continue throughout treatment, but it is key to make sure that you can afford to go back to these facilities and work with that doctor intimately. Going to a facility, of course, isn't the silver bullet. I will never say that an alternative facility is the only way of treating your cancer successfully, but essentially it is a boot camp for the immune system to where they are focusing on rejuvenating the body within a certain amount of time. So the reason that they choose to do treatment programs in the midst of 3 to 4 weeks is because the cell turnover rate is usually 21 to 28 days. So they really want to squeeze as much therapies in as possible to support the foundations of health during that amount of time to create a new cell and to strengthen the body in the long run. So a peek into my work. As you see here, it's not just all glitz and glamour of traveling to these facilities. Sure, I get to enjoy going to different places across the world, but the main thing is I get to connect with patients and also different doctors and the staff at the facility. Essentially, I'm taking the research out of the equation for the patients. So I have gone to Tijuana very frequently. I go 2 to 3 times a year. And then also I've traveled to Europe to facilities over there as well. We try our best to share the information here within our Facebook group, but also through the introduction emails or throughout our platform here at Heal Navigator. When I travel to the facilities, I eat the food at the facilities. So I'm trying to be exposed to these facilities just as if I was a patient, minus the treatments, of course. I talk to the doctors because I want to understand the treatments that they are offering, but also to know them on a soul level. I want to make sure that I feel comfortable in referring people to these facilities as if they're my own family. I also want to understand their treatments on a cellular level. Like what type of therapies are they offering? How are they different than one another? Because as you might realize, most facilities have about 80% the same thing, but 20% is usually their specialty unless it is a specialty clinic. So by traveling to these facilities so often, it allows me to get comfortable to the area, but also to what might be available for the patient. So I commonly get asked, well, when going to Tijuana, is it safe? Or do I need a passport? Or what is there to do in the area? So no, you don't need a passport to travel to Tijuana most of the time because you are traveling by land. So that is a perk to traveling to Tijuana specifically versus going to Europe. Some people don't have passports, so you can use a birth certificate and driver's license. Most facilities will pick you up from any airport that you fly into. So they arrange all transportation for you, especially in regards to traveling to Tijuana. So usually you fly into the San Diego airport, the clinic picks you up from there, brings you across the border to Tijuana, to then where you stay at the facility or sometimes at lodging if it's an outpatient facility. So these are some important things that I have been able to gather, and I provide that information to people. Also, we do send out like a list of places you can eat or stores you can shop from in regards to groceries. These are places I've been to myself, so I feel like it's a valuable tool for people to be able to resource this information for them. Sometimes I'm even able to give them some information over things for enjoyment that they might do. For instance, there's whale watching, or somebody told me they went tuna fishing when they were in Tijuana. I just had a patient that just traveled to Germany specifically, and I sent them some areas around that region to where they can go sightseeing. So these are some benefits of me being able to travel there. Most importantly, I talk to patients. So here at Heal Navigator, we try to collect reviews, put people into contact with patients that we have spoke to ourselves. As you realize online, you see good and bad reviews for clinics. It's very hard to distinguish what's a good facility and what's a bad facility. What I tell people generally is every facility will have bad reviews. I mean, we're talking about usually stage 3, stage 4 cancer patients. Most people I talk to have already gone through standard of care. Usually going to a facility is their very last option. Unfortunately, things do happen. But I will say, don't let a bad review that you read online stray you from going to a facility. If you ever have questions, I'm here to collaborate with you and to answer in the best way possible if you're questionable about anything that you read. Yes, bad things do happen, of course, too, at facilities. But again, that's Heal Navigator's verification process, is to tour the facility, to talk to the doctors, even to talk to past patients. So sometimes when we go to facilities, we have the chance of meeting patients that have been working with the facility for 8 years or 11 years. And this ensures us that patients are happy there for the long run of working with a doctor, because they're coming in for their annual checkups. Some backstory in regards to why people do phone calls with me is because sometimes they need help sifting through the information that they come across online. So with my experience and background, really, I narrowed down those options. On the phone calls with people, what I usually do is I will narrow them down to 2, 3 options for people, and I'll send them over for free consultations with those clinics. Those clinics then will collect their medical records. They then will overview that information and provide them a detailed treatment plan for them to overview or discuss with their family, and that gives them a background and a decision-making process. So we can go into why some people might choose an alternative treatment facility. Well, oftentimes there is no more options for those patients. Or they're looking for natural or holistic approaches, and standard of care options no longer align to what they're looking for. Maybe they want to avoid the harsh side effects that might come from the chemo or the immunotherapy. But I will say it doesn't have to be one way or another. Some benefits that might come from choosing an alternative treatment facility is a lessened side effect. The holistic treatment plans that are put together without you having to go back and forth from different local places near you, everything's structured underneath one roof, so you can just focus on healing. Also, the care. The care is a lot different. Whenever I talk to patients, the main thing I hear is the one-on-one care that they get from alternative treatment facilities. I have heard of stories of physicians going to people's like hotel rooms, and they will set up IVs there just because the patient, maybe they didn't feel good that day. Maybe they got chelation the day before and they're feeling a little bit yuck. Or sometimes they'll give them their cell phone number to where it feels more safe for them. Even after people have had even just a simple consultation with the clinic, they feel seen, they feel more heard, because it allows for that more one-on-one connection, where there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to standard of care treatment facilities. Some downside is there's hardly any data. We understand with standard of care treatment facilities that oftentimes they have a lot of supporting data for the medication or pharmaceuticals that they have planned for you. It's easier to study 1 or 2 or 3 different medications in a clinical setting versus 20 different alternative treatments that a facility might offer. It's harder to do those clinical studies on that wide variety of treatments. Also, treatments might vary per patient. However, there are facilities that do focus trying to collect data through their case studies. So these facilities might cater towards those people that are really searching for those data-driven facilities. We understand that it might be expensive. Though we do work with clinics, and we'll discuss this later on underneath the cost section, but overall, this is out of pocket. Most people I talk to are on Medicaid, Medicare. They have limited funds. So going to a facility is very difficult, especially since it's not covered by insurance generally. Oftentimes they have to deal with an opposing counsel. So whether it's friends or family, trying to explain why you're going to Tijuana for treatment's not the easiest thing. I have people say, I'd rather choose Europe because it's easier for me to say I'm going on vacation to Europe versus I'm going to Mexico for treatment. But the reason why Mexico is a hub is because it's right across the border from San Diego, and the FDA can't touch them. So they're able to offer a lot more treatments there and also at a cheaper cost. Another downside is choosing the right clinic. As mentioned before, it's very difficult siphoning through the information that you come online. I work with people sometimes for 2 years plus that still haven't decided on a facility because they keep going in circles. Actually, before this call, I was talking to someone over the phone that I had been working with for like a year and a half. And she said, Paityn, I keep coming across a new clinic that I'm researching, and it makes me confused as to which facility to go to. Understand that you say XYZ is good, but then I see this one and I read this review. A lot of times people are trying to find a story that aligns just to theirs, and really it's very impossible. You can often find times people that might have similar diagnosis, but at the end of the day, everyone's body is different, and it's hard to make that, I hate to say gamble, but at the end of the day, it really is. Trying to decide, is this facility really going to be the one for me? I always tell people to really tune into yourself. I'm one that believes in intuition. It might seem a bit woo, but I believe we have an inner voice that guides us. And so I say, when you talk to these doctors, like really take advantage of those free consultations and try to see what resonates with you. And we'll talk about some tips too later on that might support you, such as like having someone on the call with you as a second opinion. Another bad thing is scammers. As you might see through social media, even, you see scammers for Rick Simpson oil. Well, there's scammers for alternative clinics out there as well. So it's hard to trust like what facility is not just some hole in the wall and you're traveling to some long lost country across the world to get these treatments that seem good, and then you get there and might not be well. Again, that's what Heal Navigator is here for, and why I travel to these facilities is we have clinics verified for a reason. So if you go to Heal Navigator's website and you see next to it like a little blue badge, just a circle with a dot, that shows that we have verified these facilities. We do not verify a facility unless we've been there. It can be the most well-established facility, but unless we have been there personally, we will not verify it. So you can ensure that this is a safe place for you. Another downside here is communicating with the oncology team. Oftentimes on the phone, I hear people that they want to keep their oncology team on board because they want to continue to be monitored through the process, and to monitor their progress. So things like scan reports or to get certain diagnostics done is kind of impossible whenever you don't have that oncologist on board. So to explain to them that you're traveling to a clinic in Mexico and that you want to hold off on their standard of care treatment, it can be very difficult. There's even things like getting scans done in Mexico. Oftentimes I have people that don't have an oncologist and they need to get PET scans to monitor maybe things that they're doing at home. And there are ways of getting PET scans. So if you end up needing that information, just let me know. Usually the pricing's like $1,200 to $1,300 to get those PET scans done in Mexico. Another thing is getting follow-ups or traveling to a facility for constant follow-ups. Maybe they can't afford after the initial $45,000, or maybe going back and forth is just illogical for them. So this is kind of difficult for patients, is to make sure that they can carve out that time for themselves. In the end, you have to find what is best for you and what best aligns. So some overviews of different therapies that might be offered at alternative treatment facilities. As I mentioned before, the facilities truly try to focus on structuring programs to support the foundations of health. So some of these foundations of health is going to be oxygenation. Currently I have my air purifier going on around the corner to help me purify my air in the home. But it's not just even about the air that we breathe. Cancer hates oxygen as well. So they'll use things like vitamin C or ozone or hyperbaric. Oftentimes I hear patients, whenever they're trying to compare treatment plans, that they say, oh, this facility doesn't have hyperbaric, so they're not supporting oxygen. But that's not necessarily true. You can use vitamin C, or you can use ozone as forms of oxygenation therapies. And it might be easier for a facility to have those types of treatments there versus a big hard shell hyperbaric. However, if you choose a facility that doesn't have hyperbaric, we can always find a facility that you can do hyperbaric at a la carte. I think the sessions are like $120 last time I checked per dive. Another foundation of health that they focus on is detoxification. Every day we're introduced into toxins in our home, in the air we breathe, in the food we eat. So detoxification is key. One of the systems in our body that is not cardiac driven is the lymphatic system. Essentially, it's a garbage disposal of your body. So to open up these what's known as drainage pathways in the body and to detox the body of these toxins that we come into contact every day with, it allows the body to have a less burden on it to where it can further attack the cancer. The thing that they might use is immune support. So some things to support the immune system is going to be nutrient IVs, nutrient-dense foods, and also cell line therapies. Cell line therapies, people ask, like, what is that? I try not to use cell vaccines because the word vaccine kind of can be a little bit of a trigger word. But essentially what they do is they will take your blood, urine, or sometimes tumor biopsy and train it to attack the immune system. That's just a basic way I can break it down for you. So these type of modulations really strengthen the immune system to allow you to naturally overcome the cancer. So some common techniques that you might see at a facility is hyperthermia. Most facilities are going to offer hyperthermia or sometimes even like the saunas, the UV saunas. So this is common, but I will say most offer the hyperthermia. Some facilities, they will have like pods that they have made custom to where you don't have to do the long-term hyperthermia for 3 hours. These are quick. Usually it's about a 40-minute session, and that's all that's needed. Whereas the German technology, usually it takes approximately 3 hours. So with that, they raise the temperature, they stabilize the temperature, and then they decrease the temperature in the cool down. Usually your temperature is raised to 102 to 104 degrees, which creates a fever in the body. This allows our natural cells to overcome the cancer and again, opens up those detox pathways as well. Some other things that might be used is the dendritic cell, as prior mentioned. This is commonly done throughout Mexico. You'll see just about every facility might be doing dendritic cell vaccine because this is key. It's one of the cells that naturally occur in our body, as well as the natural killer cells and LAK cells, but the dendritic cell seems to be the most common one. Some facilities or most facilities will use the patient's blood. So they take the blood, they put it in the lab, they train it to attack the cancer cells, and then they inject it back into the patient. Whereas other facilities, like one of the ones we work with, that's a team of American scientists, they use a patented technology that actually uses the tumor tissue of the patient, and then they create the vaccine from that specifically. Some other options that might be more so common is low-dose chemo. You would think, why are they giving chemo in an alternative space? Well, actually, alternative medicine can kind of be very integrative, and we'll touch base on this here shortly. I'll show another slide with some common therapies, but you'll commonly hear insufflation therapy, IPT, or you'll hear metronomic oral chemo. Both of these methods are about 10 to 30% chemo. So you don't lose your hair, you don't feel fragile, but really it's just enough to suppress the cancer cell to allow the natural therapies to work more beneficially. I see this more so commonly utilized for patients that are stage 3, stage 4, because essentially, as I say, it's buying more time, again, to allow the body to kind of play catch up and attacking the cancer naturally. So some unique or less common therapies that are offered in the alternative space. We work with a clinic in Europe that offers regional chemotherapy. Regional chemotherapy at the specific location, the way he utilizes this technique is what he does is he puts these balloon-like stents in the tumor to temporarily cut off the blood supply to the tumor, does a chemo wash of the area, and then returns the blood supply back to the body And this prevents the chemo from going systemic in the body. Some common cancers that he treats and has had the most success with is going to be breast, sarcoma, and head and neck. He specifically derived these own techniques that he's been using for over 40 years. He's in his 70s now and is a very amazing gentleman to work with. Another clinic, as mentioned earlier, does the dendritic cell vaccine. So the way that they use it is a lot less common than other facilities. This facility specifically is a team of American scientists that's currently undergoing clinical trials here in the United States. So they were fast-tracked for glioblastoma here in the United States, and actually they have opened their pancreatic clinical trial. So if anybody on here it has pancreatic cancer and is an eligible candidate for Whipple surgery and has not undergone treatment, this could be a potential clinical trial that's open for you. So reach out to me if this is something that you're interested in knowing more about. I can put you into contact with the facility for more information. For those that can't get the clinical trials here in the United States, they do have a facility in Mexico that they accept patients to. This facility is big on gathering more information and those clinical case studies because they are a team of American scientists. They're driven strictly on data. So they are one that has a lot more statistics or analytics for patients. Their technique is known as the double-loaded dendritic cell. So they'll actually use a machine called apheresis to take out, I believe, the white blood cells of the body during that time. And then they'll take the tumor tissue, create the vaccine from that, and then they put those together, and then they'll insert it near the nearest lymph node closest to the tumor. Of course, this is done through an interventional radiologist and underneath medical supervision, but it is a very unique way of doing the dendritic cell. Another unique treatment is there's a doctor that is in Mexico, and he specializes in the cell line therapies, as I mentioned earlier. So most of the time when you go to a facility, you might just see dendritic cell, or maybe sometimes transfer factor echo 7. This doctor specifically, he specializes in these cell line therapies. He has his own lab that he works with, and he utilizes the dendritic cells, the natural killer cells, the LAK cells, peptide, and then also the tumoral vaccines, of course, depending on the cancer. So this is very unique in the way that he uses all these cells in combination to one another. He's been using these techniques for over 30 years, and this is what he specializes in. I like his facility actually because he'll even send you home with IVs to continue doing at home, and that's not really common to hear with alternative treatment facilities. Another unique or less common is some facilities really focus primarily on just detoxification and the spiritual or emotional side, or even quantum medicine side of healing. So you're not going to hear things like chemo or more integrative type techniques at these facilities at all. Or some facilities that might be more natural, like Gerson or Budwig, that's specifically what they're working on is just diet. Let's go ahead and go back and show you some more information through our slideshow. And so let's go ahead and dive into the treatment approaches and complementing standard treatments or independent paths of treatments. So to begin with, there's ways that you can complement your path with standard of care. Again, as I said earlier, that it doesn't have to be one way or another. You can use things like chelation, detoxification, nutrient IVs, hyperthermia, oxygen treatments to go alongside standard of care. Actually, in Germany, for instance, when you go to your regular oncologist, they're using things like mistletoe and hyperthermia alongside chemotherapy or other treatments. Specifically, hypothermia and chemotherapy can actually enhance the effects, so that's why they use that. Some clinics even offer detoxification or rejuvenation programs after standard of care. I've seen this actually often with people that I talk to, that they say, hey, I'm going to do standard of care, but I need some type of facility to really regain my strength or to detox my body so I'm not as toxic anymore, to where I don't have to face cancer again in the long run. Again, it doesn't have to be one way or another. So do know that. There's even things like repurposed medication that you can do from home alongside your standard of care treatments. So just know that these options are available out there. Some clinics that I've talked to in regards to patients that I sent over to them, they were wanting a second opinion. So they weren't sure if they should do the standard of care protocol that was introduced to them by their regular oncologist, or if they maybe should do the surgery or not do the surgery. So I told them you should do some consults with some alternative clinics, XYZ. I'm not going to name some right now, but there's some that I prefer talking to that have, surgical facility units and office, or they might have a background in surgical oncology, just for a second opinion. Most of the time, those facilities did say, hey, go do your treatment that is offered by your oncologist. It's a good one. Then come back to me. I've seen this happen for like certain sarcomas or blood cancers. Like this is common to see, or even aggressive cases where the tumor was very large and just needed to be shrunk or taken out completely to reduce that tumor burden in the body to where the body can then naturally overcome those maybe circulating tumor cells or smaller metastases. There's some times when alternative treatments might serve as a standalone path by itself. So there's treatments like IPT or low dose radiation or cryoablation, HIPEC or regional chemotherapy, where these are more integrative, but still alternative, and they will just be by themselves. You can usually get HIPEC and cryoablation actually here in the United States for certain types of cancer through a regular oncological facility. However, there is very slim margins that often you have to meet to qualify for those treatments. So there are facilities that you can still go to get those therapies done for a wider coverage of cancers. So low-dose radiation, for instance, since we already touched base earlier on IPT. Low-dose radiation is commonly 5 to 7 rounds of radiation. Really, they're trying to shrink an orange to a grape. So they're really wanting to reduce that tumor burden on the body. People are often shocked whenever they hear that radiation might be a tool. It's not the same as here in the United States or in standard of care, where you're getting 30 to sometimes 60 rounds of radiation. They really are using these methods as an integrative approach to treating the cancer. Cryoablation, for instance. Cryoablation is a way of freezing the tumor. So they go in with a needle and freeze that tumor directly. This is commonly seen in breast. A lot of breast cancer patients that I talk to are trying to find cryoablation so they avoid, mastectomy or lumpectomy, things like this. But it is utilized for other forms of treatment as well. HIPEC is commonly used for more abdominal cancers. I see ovarian, cervical, things like this. Again, you can get this type of therapy here in the United States, but there are facilities that do utilize these types of treatments, again, for a more integrative type of therapy. Or regional chemotherapy, as mentioned earlier, the clinic in Europe that isolates the tumor directly and does a chemo wash of the area. These types of facilities, again, they're using both types of alternative and more conventional-like approaches. Usually at these facilities, they aren't only doing cryoablation or low-dose radiation or regional chemotherapy, but they are using it as an important treatment for the patient. So now to dive into some inspiring stories, which is my favorite. And so I actually know most of these patients myself. One of them worked with another colleague here at Navigator, but still hearing her story is very motivating. So let's kind of dive in. So let's dive into the first patient who had the pleasure of working with his beautiful wife, Lynn. And I had the pleasure of meeting them whenever I was in Tijuana back in January. Stephen, he had glioblastoma. He had an egg-sized tumor in his brain. His wife reached out to me shortly after he had surgery, and she was trying to find a facility to go to. They were in between surgery and radiation. They're from Canada. Canada told them they needed to wait a month between surgery until the radiation started. And Lynn knew that glioblastoma is aggressive. She knew that there wasn't time to wait. And so she ended up getting them to a facility. It was actually really funny. I didn't know they were going to be in Mexico at the time. I knew a few other people were going to be at the same facility that they were, that she actually hunted me down in the hospital and introduced herself in person. And so I got to meet them. I was very shocked. We talked like on a Thursday. By the next Tuesday, she was there. She was very fast to get there, but she says now with every single person, because I send people to her for them to connect with past patients, she says like them going there so quickly is what's key. As you see here in the next picture in the purple sweatshirt, that's Stephen now, you know, completely different from then to now. He has been working with the facility very closely. As I mentioned before, this is key. They go, I think they went 2 or 3 times last year to the facility for checkups to continue working with them, but they also are doing standard of care options too. Sometimes with more aggressive cancers, this is necessary. As I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be one way or another, but it is a beautiful testimony to share, to show that you can overcome something that might be so grim and dim by your initial oncologist and come out stronger than ever. The next story I will mention over here, the 2 ladies. This is Babette on the left. Babette had stage 4 ovarian cancer. She found a clinic in Mexico through a partnership that we did with the clinic. We blasted it through our newsletter. She ended up going to the facility. And they were the team of American scientists that did the dendritic cell vaccine. Babette finished treatment there, and she is traveling and now back to her normal self with no evidence of disease. She has been clear since, and we're always cheering her on and watching her blog because she's always updating on that. The one in the bottom left-hand corner, you guys might notice him from a interview that I did. His name's Jeremy. Jeremy had stage 4 colorectal cancer. His story is very inspiring in himself. Jeremy did everything standard of care. He did every surgery. He did every chemo, radiation, everything that the doctors told him to do, he did. He was still sent home on palliative. His family reached out to Navigator about 2 years ago. And we put him into contact with the clinic that he went to, and he has been no evidence of disease since. So we're always cheering him on. He's very special to me. He's always willing to talk to patients too. So if you want to talk to someone, maybe you have colorectal cancer, or maybe you're wanting to go to Mexico for treatment, he's always willing to speak to people over his experience of going. He says also that's key is he still goes to Oasis every year to that facility. So yeah, he's a super awesome guy, back snowboarding and back surfing. So he's a friend of mine actually now. The next patient that I would like to mention is we actually did a Facebook Live here on the group. Her name is Rhonda, and she had stage 4 breast cancer. She was given 18 months to live. She opted for surgery in the States and then got cellulitis on that breast, or on one of the breasts. She thankfully was already in touch with one of the clinics because she reached out to me actually before she went and did surgery. And she continued talking to that physician throughout the surgery process, throughout her getting cellulitis. And the doctor told her to come down to Mexico, so she did. And he actually helped her overcome the infection in the breast, and she began treatment there. So she got stable, began treatment, and she's been no evidence of disease now. She just celebrated 1 year past that initial 18-month prognosis. And so she's someone that I hold very dear to myself. She was writing a book over her experience of overcoming cancer. And again, she's someone that is always open to talking about her experience of going to Mexico. Again, she mentions that it's very important to work with your doctor specifically. So I think she just went like last month back to Tijuana. So you might have her on social media. She's always posting her journeys there. So these are just some patients that I wanted to share, just some hope to you guys to give you inspiration and knowing that healing is possible. Just because you have a cancer diagnosis, it doesn't mean it's the end. And I'm sure you guys know this now from being on social media and digging. And, you know, when you go into your initial oncologist, they're very quick to say, like, you either do this or you die, or even if you do this, you're still going to die. And that's not necessarily the case. I always say, no one's God. No one can tell you when your time here on earth is done with. So please have hope in your heart and know to keep pushing on, because the mindset is everything as well. So next, we're going to move on to cost. So cost is a big thing. People often ask, like, how much are these facilities? Can I afford these facilities? They see online that, you know, a facility is 120,000 or 200,000 or 30,000 a month and all this. I always tell people to be very transparent with me and what you can afford. There are clinics for anyone and everyone for all budgets available. Now, there's a difference, though, between that. If you're wanting, say, an a la carte clinic versus a full treatment plan, of course, they're going to cater more to a lower cost budget. But if that's all you can afford and you're wanting some specific therapies that you can't get here in the United States, go for it. You know, I can help you find some that specifically do cryoablation or specifically do dendritic cell or natural killer cells or mistletoe. I'm here to help any way possible. You don't have to go and spend a huge chunk of money for therapies that you might need. Now, there are facilities that do structured treatment plans. This is common. Most facilities are going to do a treatment plan for 3 to 4 weeks on average, again, for that cell turnover rate. That's why they're keeping you there, usually for that shorter amount of time. Here in the United States, usually you see clinics 6 to 13 weeks. The treatment plans are structured to support all the foundations of health, again, during that time. Essentially, it's a boot camp for your immune system. You're being treated 8 to 2 or 8 to 5 each day. You're getting a wide variety of treatments while you're there. And it's usually catered to your specific diagnosis. Now, there's inpatient options and outpatient options that come into play. Usually, inpatient options are going to be more expensive than an outpatient facility. Inpatient options are generally going to be around like the 30,000 range. I would say 30 to 40,000 for an inpatient option. Whereas outpatient, yes, some are still higher, 40, 80,000, but on average, you can find outpatient facilities for 15 to 19,000 because you're not paying for the accommodations needed at that specific facility. If you stay outpatient, usually the clinics, they are in agreement with hotels or Airbnbs, or maybe they own their own apartments that are specifically for the patients at that facility. So that is some differences in the price ranging. Also, the individualization of treatments. That word gets me sometimes. So if you're wanting a program more individualized, like that cell line therapy, right? Or like that regional chemotherapy, more tumor targeted techniques, like people often hear of, you know, intratumoral injections, even these facilities are going to be more expensive. You're going to see these prices, you know, about 50,000 above. Really, you're coming closer to the 80,000, 100,000 range for that more individualized program. However, there are some that are individualized that are still in the 45,000 range. But if you're wanting that versus like a set program, then you are going to be looking possibly at a higher price tag. Length of the program. The length of the program, of course, varies by clinic, but as mentioned before, on average, it's 3 to 4 weeks. If you're wanting a shorter program, say you can't travel for 3 weeks. I've worked with people like this personally. I can only get away for a week. Then that's when like the a la carte programs will fall more into your category. And we can talk about some of those for those shorter programs, and potentially it will be cheaper. I know a facility here in the United States that they have a 13-week program for approximately 120 to 210,000, whereas another 13-week program here in the United States, their price range is approximately like 40 to 60,000. So again, it depends on the type of treatment that might be offered at that facility as well. Also, is follow-up included in the pricing? This is always key. And I ask people to make sure to ask this during the consultation and to be very careful with the way that clinics might word things as well, because they might say follow-ups included, but oftentimes it might just be like the initial diagnostic appointments for like 1 or 2 days, and the actual treatments aren't included. So I tell them to try to get like a structured routine for your follow-up. If they do say it's included, that way you can see it visually and you know. If not, be expected to pay another amount whenever it comes time to return to the facilities. So on average, whenever you follow up and you go back to the facility, I always say to get ready to pay around 6,000 to 15,000 on average, depending on the facility, for that 1 week return. Usually you return back after 3 months of going to a facility. So you go to your treatment facility for the initial, 3 to 4 weeks, which let's just say is 45,000. Then you go home, you do a 3-month at-home protocol. Usually they ask for a scan for you to get done when you're at home. If you can't, then you let them know and they can get you a scan in Tijuana or wherever you're at in the world usually, but specifically Tijuana I'm more familiar with. And then whenever they get those scan reports, they will then determine if you need to come back at the 3-month mark, or if you need to come back, you can wait and come back at the 6-month mark. Most patients I talk to, they don't want to just wait and come back at the 6-month mark. They really want to go back at 3 months and do that 1 week visit then. And then again, you return home, and then you then are reevaluated at 6 months. If you're clear at 6 months, then a lot of times you're looking to return maybe annually at that point. You're going to return back once a year. And again, you'll pay that 8,000 or 6,000 to 15,000 again for that 1 week return. Another thing that might come into play is travel. So logically, if you're here in the United States or if you're in Canada, it's easier for you to travel from here to Mexico versus having to buy plane ticket all the way over to Europe. It can kind of be more expensive. So this can play into it as well. Also, if you're having to pay for if you're staying outpatient, you're having to pay for lodging, then that falls underneath travel expenses as well. Roughly on average, I see lodging can vary between 60 to 150. That's kind of a wide gap, but it just depends on if the facility has apartments, or if you're staying in an Airbnb, or if you're staying at a hotel that they're in contract with. Also, aftercare. Just making sure that if that aftercare is going to be included. Some facilities, they will include 3 months of nutraceuticals and supplements, whereas others, they're gonna, if you're gonna go home, say with IVs, they're gonna ask for you to pay approximately like 15,000 for 8 to 12 weeks of IVs that you'll go home with. And then that will be additional cost as well. Sometimes facilities might ask you to buy certain machinery for the aftercare. So again, these are questions asked during those free consultations to make sure that you have the wide overview of treatments. So let's go ahead and move into finance. This is important. Some people really do have a lot of questions over how can I afford to go to a facility? And there are a lot of different options. I do want to mention there are some clinics that we work with that if you have like a PPO insurance plan, and I did list them here for you guys to note, you can take a picture of this or write them down. These are some common insurances that might have international coverage on their plans. If you have questions about that, then I can introduce you to the facilities that do work with insurance to where they can potentially run your insurance pre-authorized to see what you can get reimbursed. But I have seen people get reimbursed from 70 to 90% of treatments because they've figured out how to hack the system. Well, I guess because they work out of a hospital and they can code it, but it's pretty interesting how they can do that. I wish most could. Another way is Samaritan Ministries. Samaritan Ministries actually is a health share. Some people might be familiar with them, some people not. They cover like 30,000 to 40,000 for people to get treatment at. So this is very interesting. As long as there's a doctor, like a licensed physician at that facility, then they'll cover it. And I've seen people successfully get approved through Samaritan Ministries. So if you have them, definitely reach out to them and ask them about coverage of going overseas for treatment or even utilizing it here in the United States for alternative treatment facilities. Another thing is crowdfunding. People often are scared to put themselves out there through, GoFundMes or other crowdfunding sources. And I always say the most vulnerable you are, and it's hard, but the most vulnerable you are in regards to crowdfunding, the better it will be in regards to having your community reach out and help you. You have to be vulnerable. You have to show them why you're doing alternative treatments. People often, they don't know what they don't know, and sometimes, yes, it's easy for people to just question and say, well, why aren't they doing standard of care? But if you show them the beauty of alternative treatments and how these can be more beneficial, you're planting those seeds and potentially helping someone in the future, one, but people also will be more than willing to reach out and share. And help you. $5 or $10, it can go so far in raising funds in the long run, especially if you have someone that's younger, that's more tech savvy, that can help you launch your campaign and help share it. TikTok is such a thing, or Instagram reels, make a quick reel, have it go viral. These are ways of you can collect funds from your community or reach out to your church even and have a QR code and have people scan it. Actually, I saw someone locally, they were standing on the side, how kids do fundraising for their sports events. They were raising funds for cancer treatment. So I scanned the QR code and I donated to them recently, but that's another way of doing it. It is being a little bit more vulnerable, but that is a way of funding these types of treatment. Also, interesting enough, life insurance. Some people do have life insurance plans. They might not have like rider policies on those life insurance, but we have partnered with a company, and I can send that information to people that might be interested, to where they do purchase these life insurance policies for you, or they sell it. Basically, a broker explains like the advantages and the potential disadvantages, ensuring that you make an informed decision. And then they will assist you in finding an ideal buyer for your policy. So this is an interesting offering, but this is another way of being able to afford these types of treatment facilities. So some practical tips in regards to choosing a treatment facility or understanding what might be best for you. So key, I always tell people, is to utilize your free consultations. You want to consult with 2 or 3 different facilities, and you want to make sure that you compare their treatment plans. Oftentimes, when you compare their treatment plans, you will realize that 80% is the same thing as mentioned earlier, and 20% is going to be different. But the key is realizing that maybe every facility might offer hyperthermia, but how often are you getting that hyperthermia? Or maybe one facility advertises offering 21 different therapies. How often are you getting those 21 different therapies? This is key to note, because you're seeing essentially where your money is going. You're seeing if the clinic, is based off of just they're well-known, like based off their reputation, that's where the pricing comes into play, or if it's purely on the treatments that you get. So I always tell people to really pay attention to those treatment plans. And if you ever need help like siphoning through it, I oftentimes just do calls with people just to discuss different treatment plans and help them understand what certain treatments might be as well. Another key thing is to make sure that you have a supporting family member on the calls with you. You want to make sure that you have someone there because it's a lot of information. A lot of times they're using terms you might know. You might feel frazzled. I do. I know that for certain, even doing live events, trying to understand like what is going on that your doctor is saying. I know when I work with my naturopath, a lot of times I will have a friend come with me to the clinic because I have a lot of emotions tied into things. So it's good to have like a second opinion there for someone to take notes, maybe things that you're not hearing because you're focused on like one thing. And then you can compare notes at the end. So this is often well to have. Also try speaking with a previous patient. I can help with this, or sometimes the clinics can as well. Some clinics are more about privacy with their patients, but I do have like a list of patients that I've worked with over the years that I try to put people into contact with. I try to match diagnosis to diagnosis, but even not maybe the same clinic or maybe the same region to where people feel comfortable. I've realized that when people talk to patients that have gone to these facilities, they feel more safe, they feel more secure, they feel seen and heard, and it just gives a whole nother comfort and more confidence to their decision-making process. So I say this is key. Another thing is to act fast. Oftentimes I see people that due to finances, or maybe they're unsure of the facility and they keep going back and forth. You really need to act fast, especially if you have a more aggressive type cancer or some, aren't doing anything at home. You have to have some type of treatment plan going for you. If you're having a hard time even finding out how to get started from alternative cancer treatments, and you have cancer and you haven't done anything yet, you have all this information to siphon through, please reach out to me. I'm here to help you any way possible. We can go over like some first steps and then maybe some calls with clinics, or maybe a clinic's not for you and you're just trying to do things from home. I really am here to help any way possible, but you do have to have some treatment plan and some path going for you on your journey, because there are ways to overcome this. And I know I'm an avoidant personality. I know when life becomes overwhelming, it's easier to just avoid things and ignore it. But with cancer, unfortunately, it's not something that we can just avoid, and we have to have a methodical way of handling it. I appreciate you guys and joining this webinar. I hope it was a good overview in regards to what my work is like, what alternative clinics are, what some treatments are. I tried to narrow down all this information into 1 hour. It's very difficult because my head's kind of always spinning with information I want to share, but I can kind of be like a squirrel and get off on a tangent. So here is my phone number. It's my direct number. You can reach me directly through there. You can text or call me. Also, my email address, paityn@healnavigator.com. I also linked our website, healnavigator.com, and this fancy little QR code, you can currently scan it and it'll bring up my contact ID to where you can save it, and it has the website, my email address and phone number on there as well to just be more convenient for you guys. Well, thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time for our next live event. I believe we have one coming up next week, so stay tuned for our next speaker that will be joining me.